Chapter 1. The Soulful Stranger. The rain had been relentless for days, a relentless drumbeat against the grimy windows of Evelyn Thorne's small, charming cafe, the Quiet Hearth. Its warmth was a stark contrast to the unforgiving streets of the city, a haven she had meticulously built with her own two hands, fueled by a kindness that often bordered on naive. Evelyn, with her sharp, intelligent eyes and an exterior that projected cool confidence, possessed a heart as soft as the freshly baked pastries on her counter. She saw the world in shades of grey, but always sought out the light, especially in those overlooked. One particularly blustery Tuesday, the chime above the door sang a mournful tune as a figure entered, shedding rivulets of water onto the worn wooden floor. He was a man carved from shadows and rain, tall, gaunt, with an old, battered guitar case clutched in a grip that seemed both fragile and fiercely possessive. His clothes were threadbare, clinging to a frame that spoke of hardship, and his dark hair fell carelessly across a face that might have been handsome once, now etched with a profound, almost ancient sorrow. He didn't meet her gaze. His eyes, the colour of a stormy sea, fixed on some distant, unseen horizon. He ordered a black coffee, his voice a low, gravelly whisper that barely carried over the brewing espresso machine. Evelyn, usually adept at reading people, found him an enigma. He exuded a palpable loneliness, a silence so profound it felt like a presence itself. He settled into the farthest corner booth, not touching his coffee, simply staring out at the rain-streaked street. The cafe slowly emptied as the evening drew in, leaving only Evelyn wiping down counters and the silent stranger. A tremor of unease, quickly replaced by her innate compassion, stirred within her. He seemed less a customer and more a refugee from the storm, both outside and within. "Rough night out there," Evelyn offered, her voice soft but steady as she refilled his cup. Unbidden, he flinched slightly, as if unaccustomed to human interaction, and then offered a curt nod. There was a flicker in his eyes, a momentary recognition, before they retreated back into their haunted depths. Evelyn noticed the subtle tremble in his hands as he finally lifted the mug, the steam rising around his face like a fragile shroud. She wondered what stories those hands held, what melodies they had woven from silent pain. He stayed long after closing time, oblivious to the subtle cues. Evelyn didn't have the heart to ask him to leave. Instead, she brought him a plate of leftover scones and a cup of warming chamomile tea. "You look like you could use something more substantial," she said, placing the plate gently before him. "No charge." He looked up then, his gaze meeting hers, and for a fleeting moment, Evelyn saw something profound, a raw, unprotected vulnerability that startled her. It was a window into a soul battered by an unseen tempest. He murmured a quiet, "Thank you," the words sounding foreign, unused. As the late hour bled into midnight, the rain finally softened to a gentle drizzle. The man seemed to gather himself, a deep sigh escaping his lips. He rose, his movements slow and deliberate, and picked up his guitar case. I have nowhere to go," he admitted, his voice barely audible, the raw honesty a sharp contrast to his earlier silence. It wasn't a plea, more a statement of fact, devoid of self-pity, yet resonating with a deep-seated desperation. Evelyn felt a familiar ache in her chest. She had seen that look before, in her own reflection, during a time when her world had crumbled. "You can stay here tonight," she heard herself say, the words escaping before she could fully consider them. Her practical side screamed caution, but her heart, that inconveniently empathetic muscle, had already made its decision. "I have a small apartment above the cafe. There's a couch. It's warm." He paused, his eyes searching hers, as if trying to discern her motives, perhaps expecting a trick. But Evelyn's gaze held only genuine concern. After a long moment, a ghost of a nod, almost imperceptible, was his answer. As he followed her up the creaking wooden stairs, Evelyn couldn't shake the feeling that she had just invited not just a stranger, but an entire universe of unspoken sorrow into her carefully constructed life. The air around him felt heavy, charged with an invisible current, a melody yet unplayed. She knew with a certainty that defied logic that her quiet life was about to change irrevocably. The rain outside seemed to whisper a prelude to an untold story. Chapter 2. A glimmer of sound. The morning light, pale and hesitant, filtered through the window of Evelyn's small living room, painting the old wooden floors in soft hues. Julian, for that was the name he finally offered, a reluctant offering, like a secret whispered into the wind, was already awake. He sat by the window, his gaze fixed on the quiet street below, a steaming mug of black coffee clutched in his hands. He looked less like a homeless man and more like a weary poet, lost in contemplation. Evelyn found him there, her own heart a mix of curiosity and a strange protectiveness. "Slept okay?" she asked gently, pushing a plate of freshly made pancakes towards him. He nodded, a faint, yes, barely audible, "Thank you for everything." His voice, though still quiet, held a hint of genuine gratitude, a fragile bloom in the barren landscape of his demeanour. Evelyn watched him eat, slowly, deliberately, as if savouring each bite. He ate with the quiet dignity of someone unaccustomed to such simple comforts. Days turned into a week, and Julian's presence became a silent, yet profound fixture in Evelyn's life. He was a man of routines. Up before dawn, he would often sit by the window, sometimes sketching in a small, worn notebook, sometimes simply staring into the middle distance. He rarely spoke, but his eyes, when they occasionally met hers, held a depth that hinted at untold stories. Evelyn, respecting his silence, never pressed, but she observed. She noticed the way his fingers would often absent-mindedly trace patterns on the table, as if playing an invisible instrument, or how he would sometimes hum a low, melancholic tune under his breath, a melody that felt ancient and full of loss. He began to help out in the cafe. Wordlessly, he would sweep the floors before Evelyn even opened, or meticulously wipe down tables, his movements precise and methodical. His presence, initially unnerving to some customers, slowly became part of the quiet hearth's unique charm. A few regulars even noticed the subtle shift in his aura, a fractional softening around the edges, a less haunted look in his eyes when he believed no one was watching. One evening, after the last customer had left and the rain had once again begun its gentle patter, Evelyn was alone in the cafe, tallying the day's earnings. Julian had retreated upstairs, his customary retreat into solitude. A soft, hesitant sound drifted down the stairs, a single pure note struck on a guitar. Evelyn froze, her pen suspended mid-air. It was a sound full of yearning, a fragile thread woven from velvet and sorrow. Another note followed, then another, slowly building into a melody, simple yet profoundly evocative. It was a piece unlike anything Evelyn had ever heard. It wasn't just music, it was a living, breathing entity, full of unspoken grief, tender remembrance, and an almost unbearable beauty. Each note resonated with the raw emotion that Julian usually kept so carefully hidden. He was playing his battered guitar, the instrument that had been his silent companion. Evelyn found herself drawn inexorably towards the sound. She walked to the foot of the stairs, her heart beating a slow, steady rhythm against her ribs. The melody swelled, rising and falling like a tide of emotion. It spoke of wind-swept shores, of forgotten promises, of a love lost but never extinguished. Evelyn felt a strange chill ripple down her spine, a sensation that had nothing to do with the cool evening air. The air in the cafe seemed to thicken, to hum with an invisible energy. The scent of rain and old wood intensified, mingling with something else, something subtle and sweet, like wildflowers blooming in the winter. Then, for a fleeting, bewildering moment, Evelyn thought she saw it. A shimmer in the air near the top of the stairs, a faint, almost transparent outline, like a silhouette against the dim light, swaying gently to Julian's mournful tune. It was gone as quickly as it appeared. A trick of the light, a figment of her imagination, she told herself, brought on by the haunting beauty of the music and the late hour. She blinked, shaking her head slightly, dismissing the fleeting image. Julian's playing continued, a private communion. He wasn't playing for an audience or for praise, but for something far deeper, far more personal. The music was his language, his solace, his unwavering link to a past that still clung to him like a second skin. As the final notes faded, leaving behind an echoing silence that felt heavier than sound, Evelyn realized her breath was hitched in her throat. She had witnessed a moment of profound intimacy, a window into Julian's soul. And for just a split second, she had felt an inexplicable presence, a silent observer drawn to the heart-wrenching beauty of his song. The world, for Evelyn, had just become a little less solid, a little more mysterious. Chapter 3. The Ghost in the Melody. The haunting melody from Julian's guitar had burrowed deep into Evelyn's mind, replaying itself in her thoughts, a constant, beautiful ache. The fleeting glimpse of a shimmering form at the top of the stairs, however, refused to be dismissed as mere fatigue. It clung to her periphery, a persistent whisper of the impossible. She watched Julian more closely now, observing the way he would sometimes pause mid-sweep, his eyes distant, as if listening to something she couldn't hear, or how a particular turn of phrase in a customer's conversation would trigger a profound sadness in his eyes. He was a man living between worlds, she realized, tethered to a reality she couldn't yet grasp. Their interactions remained sparse, built on gestures rather than words. Evelyn left him fresh coffee and food. He, in turn, fixed a creaky door, mended a faulty light, always returning the kindness in his own silent, capable way. A fragile trust began to bloom between them, a silent understanding that transcended their different lives. Evelyn found herself increasingly drawn to the quiet strength beneath his weary exterior, to the unspoken stories held within his melancholy gaze. One evening, the cafe was quiet. Julian, after helping Evelyn close, sat in his usual corner, not playing his guitar, but simply holding it, his fingers idly plucking at the strings, creating a series of soft, resonant chords. Evelyn, sitting across from him, sipping her tea, finally broke the silence that had grown comfortable between them. "That song you played the other night," she began, her voice hesitant. "It was breathtaking. What was it?" Julian's fingers stilled. He looked up, his eyes meeting hers, and for the first time Evelyn saw a raw, almost painful emotion surface. "It's a love song," he murmured, his voice thick with a grief so profound it twisted Evelyn's heart. "For Ilara." The name, Ilara, hung in the air, delicate and fragile, like a forgotten petal. She was everything. Evelyn felt a pang of sympathy, a recognition of a shared wound. She had known loss too, though not as deeply etched as Julian's. "I'm so sorry," she said genuinely. "She must have been very special." He gave a slow, painful nod. "More than special. She was the light." He paused, his gaze drifting towards the window, where the first stars were beginning to appear. "Sometimes, when I play for her, she comes back." The words were spoken so simply, so matter-of-factly, that Evelyn almost dismissed them as a poetic metaphor for memory. "Comes back?" Evelyn prompted, her voice barely a whisper, a strange tremor of anticipation running through her. Julian looked back at her, his expression serious, unwavering. "Yes, not physically, not in a way anyone else can see, but I feel her. I know she's there, listening." He traced the polished wood of his guitar. "This song, it's a bridge, a way for me to feel close to her, a way for her to visit." Evelyn's breath caught. It wasn't a metaphor. He believed it. And suddenly, the shimmering form she had seen, the inexplicable chill, the sweet scent, it all coalesced into a terrifying, yet strangely compelling truth. "Julian," she said, her voice strained, I think I saw her the other night, when you were playing." His eyes widened fractionally, a jolt of surprise passing through their depths. He studied her face intently, searching for disbelief, for mockery, but finding only earnestness. You saw her," he breathed, a raw wonder in his voice. "Impossible. Only He trailed off, shaking his head, a conflict warring in his expression. "A shimmer," Evelyn clarified, "a silhouette. It was fleeting, but it was there, near the stairs." A profound silence descended upon them, broken only by the distant hum of the city. Julian slowly, deliberately, began to play Ilara's song. His fingers moved with a practiced grace, coaxing forth the familiar, heart-wrenching melody. Evelyn watched him, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm. She focused on the space near the stairs, where she had seen the apparition before. As the notes filled the air, gaining momentum and emotional depth, a faint luminescence began to manifest. It was subtle at first, like heat haze. Then slowly, undeniably, it began to coalesce into a form, a woman. She was ethereal, shimmering like moonlight on water, her features indistinct but radiating a serene beauty. She moved with a delicate grace, drifting closer to Julian, her translucent gaze fixed on him, a faint, melancholic smile playing on her lips. Evelyn could feel a shift in the air, a drop in temperature, and the subtle, sweet scent of wildflowers once again wafted through the cafe. Evelyn stared, transfixed, her breath held captive in her lungs. The spectral woman, Ilara, was real. She was there, a ghost woven from love and music, returning to her beloved. Julian, lost in the depths of his song, his eyes closed, seemed utterly immersed in her presence, feeling her essence, even if he couldn't see her as clearly as Evelyn could. The experience was terrifying, yet exquisitely beautiful, a poignant testament to a love that defied death itself. Evelyn felt a strange mix of awe and a nascent, unidentifiable jealousy bloom in her chest. She was witnessing a miracle, a profound communion, but she was also an outsider, watching a love story that spanned beyond the grave, and an ache of loneliness, sharp and unexpected, pierced her heart. Chapter 4. The Shadow of His Past. The morning after Ilara's undeniable manifestation, a profound shift had occurred between Julian and Evelyn. The unspoken had been spoken, the impossible made visible. Evelyn no longer viewed Julian as merely a melancholic musician. He was a gatekeeper to a secret world, a man touched by a love so strong it defied the boundaries of life and death. The fear she initially felt was now mingled with an insatiable curiosity and a deep, empathetic pull towards the man who lived with a ghost. Julian, too, seemed subtly changed. The shared experience, the fact that Evelyn could see Ilara, had opened a fragile new door within him. His eyes held less guardedness when he looked at her, a flicker of wonder mixed with relief. He knew he wasn't alone in his reality anymore. They sat together after closing, The cafe hushed around them, the air still thick with the lingering scent of Ilara's presence. Her name was Ilara Vance. Julian began, his voice a low rumble, the words tumbling out like stones from a dam finally breaking. We met years ago when I was a different man, a different life. He paused, a bitter laugh escaping him. Julian Vance, that was my name then. Heir to Vance Holdings, a multi-billion-dollar real estate empire, a life of boardrooms and balance sheets, a life I hated. Evelyn listened, wide-eyed, the pieces of the puzzle slowly falling into place, the reserved demeanour, the quiet dignity, the hint of refinement beneath the rough exterior. It all made sense. He wasn't just poor, he had chosen this poverty. Or rather, it had chosen him after a catastrophic loss. Ilara, he continued, his voice softening, she was a botanist, wild, free-spirited, full of life. She saw through all the pretense, the money, the expectations. She saw me. His gaze drifted, lost in memory. We fell in love like a storm. Fierce, consuming. My family disapproved, of course. She wasn't suitable. But I didn't care. I was going to leave it all for her, build a life with her, somewhere quiet, away from the concrete jungle. A deep, shuddering breath escaped him. We were driving to meet my lawyer, to sign away my inheritance, to cut ties. It was raining, just like that first night I walked into your cafe. A truck swerved, a blind spot, a moment of carelessness. His voice cracked, raw with the pain of retelling. I survived. She didn't. They said it was instantaneous, but I feel like a part of me died with her. He looked at Evelyn, his eyes brimming with unshed tears. My family, they blamed her, said she was a distraction, that she took me away from my duties. They disowned me, thinking I'd come crawling back. But I couldn't. The world of Vance Holdings, the ambition, the pursuit of wealth, it all felt hollow, empty, a desecration of her memory. So I walked away, left everything, took only her locket and this guitar, a gift from her. He gestured to the instrument resting against his knee. I became Julian, the nameless, forgotten musician. My only purpose, my only connection to her was my music. This song, it's the last one I wrote for her before the accident, and it calls her back. Evelyn sat in stunned silence, the sheer weight of his loss, the magnitude of his sacrifice, the fantastical element of Ilara's return. It was almost too much to process. She saw the proud heir, the man who had renounced a fortune for love, now reduced to a lonely musician, kept company by a ghost. Julian, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. I don't know what to say. That's an incredible story. It's not a story, Evelyn, he corrected gently, a faint, melancholic smile playing on his lips. It's my life, and Ilara, she's not just a memory. She's here. She is here. He looked towards the empty space where Ilara usually manifested, a profound tenderness in his gaze. Evelyn felt a complex swirl of emotions, awe for the depth of his love, sadness for his perpetual grief, and a growing, undeniable admiration for the man who had traded an empire for a guitar and a ghost. But beneath it all, a different emotion, one she tried to push down, began to stir. Watching Julian speak of Ilara with such raw, undying devotion, Evelyn felt a strange twist in her gut. It was a faint, unfamiliar ache, a tiny seed of longing for a love so consuming, so profound. A love that, she realised with a start, she was beginning to feel for the broken, beautiful man sitting before her, even knowing his heart was forever entwined with a woman from beyond the veil. The truth of Julian's past had unveiled not only a fantastical reality, but also the burgeoning complexity of her own feelings. Chapter 5. a love beyond the veil. With Julian's past revealed and Ilara's spectral presence no longer a secret, Evelyn found her world expanding beyond the mundane. She witnessed Ilara's manifestations more frequently now, especially when Julian played his guitar. Ilara was not just a fleeting shimmer. Sometimes Evelyn could discern faint details, the elegant sweep of her hair, the ethereal drape of her dress, the pure, joyful light in her translucent eyes as she watched Julian. Ilara was a silent guardian, a beautiful, sorrowful presence, intrinsically linked to Julian's music. Evelyn started making a conscious effort to understand Ilara, to communicate with her in her own silent way. She would sometimes offer a gentle smile towards the space where Ilara appeared, or speak aloud to her, acknowledging her presence. To her surprise, Ilara would sometimes respond with a subtle shift in luminescence, a faint, sweet scent, or a calming warmth that enveloped Evelyn, as if the spirit recognized her kindness. There was no malice in Ilara, only an abiding, unwavering love for Julian, and a serene acceptance of Evelyn's quiet compassion. Julian, slowly, cautiously, began to let Evelyn further into his solitude. He showed her Ilara's worn locket, a silver disc engraved with delicate botanical patterns. He shared fragments of their life together, tales of hikes in the mountains, of quiet evenings spent stargazing, of their shared dreams of a life unburdened by wealth. Evelyn listened, her heart aching for the young couple who had lost so much. The stories painted a vivid picture of a pure, vibrant love, making Ilara's spectral presence not a burden, but a testament. Yet, as Evelyn delved deeper into Julian's world, her own feelings for him grew, tangled and complex. She admired his artistic soul, his quiet strength, the profound depth of his love for Ilara. She found herself drawn to his melancholic beauty, to the raw emotion he poured into his music. There was a quiet intensity in his gaze that stirred something deep within her. The thought of him leaving, of his returning to the shadows from which he came, now brought a sharp pang of fear. She was falling for a man whose heart was occupied by a ghost. One evening Julian was playing Ilara's song. The cafe was bathed in the soft glow of fairy lights, the scent of coffee and old books mingling in the air. Ilara manifested, shimmering brighter than usual, her form almost solid. She drifted towards Julian, a look of profound peace on her face. As the music reached its crescendo, Ilara's hand, ethereal and transparent, reached out, not to Julian, but to Evelyn. Evelyn, startled, didn't flinch. She felt a cool, gentle touch, like moonlight brushing her skin. A warmth spread through her, a wave of pure, unconditional love washing over her. And then a thought, clear as a bell, entered her mind. Not in words, but in a profound feeling. Take care of him. Love him. He deserves to live. It was Ilara's voice, a silent, powerful benediction. Evelyn's eyes welled up with tears, a mix of sorrow and a strange, overwhelming joy. It was a passing of the torch, a gesture of profound grace from a spirit who understood the enduring power of love. Julian, finishing the song, opened his eyes. He saw the tears in Evelyn's eyes, the profound emotion etched on her face. He saw the faint, shimmering glow around her, and understood. Ilara had communicated with her. He looked at Ilara, whose form was now beginning to fade, a serene smile on her lips, a final, loving glance towards Evelyn, before she dissolved completely, leaving only the lingering scent of wildflowers. What did she say?" Julian asked, his voice hoarse, his gaze fixed on Evelyn, a new vulnerability in his eyes. Evelyn took a shaky breath, her heart overflowing. "She said to love you, to take care of you." She met his gaze, her own eyes brimming with an unspoken confession. "She wants you to live, Julian, truly live. A profound silence descended upon the cafe, charged with unspoken emotions. Julian looked at Evelyn, then at the empty space where Elara had been, a complex array of feelings warring in his storm-coloured eyes. The past, the present, and the impossible intertwined in that moment. Elara, the love of his past, had given her blessing for a future he hadn't dared to imagine. Evelyn, the woman of his present, had just laid her heart bare, not just to him, but to his ghost. The boundaries of their love story, already unconventional, had just expanded beyond the veil, guided by a spirit's selfless love. Chapter 6. A Shadow from the Past. The quiet understanding between Julian and Evelyn deepened in the weeks that followed Elara's silent blessing. Julian, once cloaked in perpetual sorrow, now carried a lighter burden. He started sharing more, not just about Elara, but about his own thoughts, his dreams for his music. Evelyn, in turn, found herself confiding in him, sharing her own vulnerabilities. Her past hurts. Their connection was a delicate bloom, nurtured by shared secrets and profound empathy, yet always under the subtle gaze of Elara's enduring spirit, whose visits, though less frequent, were always imbued with a serene, encouraging energy. Just as a fragile sense of peace began to settle, a jarring note struck. One crisp autumn afternoon, a sleek black car, far too expensive for their humble street, pulled up outside the quiet hearth. A woman stepped out, a vision of polished elegance and cutting ambition. She was tall, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, her red hair styled in sharp, sophisticated lines, and her eyes, the colour of jade, held a cool, assessing glint. She swept into the cafe like a whirlwind, her presence instantly disrupting the comfortable ambience. This was Serena Caldwell, Julian Vance's former fiancée, a woman who had been groomed for power and accustomed to getting what she wanted. Serena's gaze, sharp and predatory, immediately landed on Julian, who was silently wiping down tables. Her eyes narrowed, a flicker of something akin to disgust and possessiveness passing through them. "Julian Vance!" she articulated, her voice a silken whip, cutting through the usual hum of conversation. Or should I say, the infamous pauper musician Julian, living in squalor. Julian stiffened, his body tensing, all the old walls he had slowly dismantled with Evelyn slamming back into place. He turned, his face a mask of cold indifference, yet Evelyn, watching from behind the counter, saw the subtle clench of his jaw, the flash of pain in his eyes. "Serena," he acknowledged, his voice flat, devoid of emotion, "to what do I owe this unexpected pleasure?" Serena ignored the sarcasm. She surveyed the modest cafe with a disdainful sniff, her gaze lingering on Evelyn for a fraction longer than necessary, taking in her simple apron and the comfortable warmth of the space. "Pleasure? Hardly. Your family has been in an uproar, Julian, with the recent passing of your uncle. You are the last surviving Vance heir. There are legal matters, shares, properties, a vast fortune awaiting your return." Her words dripped with condescension, yet also with a clear intent to lure him back to the life he had so deliberately abandoned. "I have no interest," Julian stated, his voice firm. "That life is not mine anymore." Serena's laughter was a brittle, sharp sound. "Oh, really? And what is this, Julian? A noble experiment in poverty, playing the heartbroken artist for this cafe owner." Her eyes flicked to Evelyn, a sneer twisting her perfectly made-up lips. "Don't tell me you found solace in the arms of a commoner after losing your precious Elara." The cruel jab hit its mark, aimed directly at Julian's most vulnerable spot. Evelyn felt a surge of protectiveness, her hands clenching into fists under the counter. The woman's arrogance was suffocating. She stepped forward, her gaze unwavering as she met Serena's icy stare. "My cafe may be common, Ms. Caldwell, but it holds more warmth and honesty than any boardroom you've ever walked into, and Julian is a guest here, not a pawn in your games." Serena merely raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow, her expression one of amused contempt. "How quaint, a feisty little thing. You clearly don't understand the world Julian belongs to, dear. A world of power, influence, and real wealth. This artistic phase, and this little cafe, it's merely a temporary detour. He belongs back where he can make a difference, where he can rebuild his name, not wallowing in a ghost-haunted fantasy." The word ghost-haunted hung in the air, a venomous dart. Julian's face paled. Serena had done her research, digging into the rumours, twisting the truth. She was not just trying to reclaim him, she was trying to discredit him, to paint him as delusional, to separate him from Evelyn and the quiet life he had found. "Get out, Serena," Julian said, his voice low and dangerous, a warning tremor running through it. Serena, however, merely smiled, a cold, calculating curve of her lips. "I'll be staying in town for a while, Julian. Perhaps you'll reconsider your priorities. A man of your caliber doesn't belong in such humble surroundings." She then turned her back, walking out as imperiously as she had entered, leaving behind a lingering scent of expensive perfume and a chill that permeated the warmth of the quiet hearth. Evelyn and Julian stood in the sudden silence, the fragile peace of their world shattered by the brutal intrusion of his past. The fight for Julian and for their unconventional love had just begun. Chapter 7. Whispers and Warring Hearts. Serena Caldwell's reappearance cast a long, ominous shadow over the quiet hearth. Her words, laced with disdain and thinly veiled threats, lingered in the air, stirring anxieties that Julian and Evelyn had carefully kept at bay. News of Julian Vance, the once lost heir, resurfacing as a humble musician, quickly spread through the city's elite circles, fueled by Serena's subtle manipulations. Society pages hinted at his delusional state, his unsuitable companions, and the scandalous rejection of his family legacy. Evelyn found herself facing subtle judgment. Customers, once charmed by Julian's quiet presence, now eyed him with curiosity, their whispers speculating about his past, his sanity, and her association with him. Some regulars, influenced by the rumours, stopped coming. Evelyn, though outwardly resilient, felt the sting of their unspoken accusations, the pressure of a world that judged without understanding. Julian, meanwhile, retreated into himself, the old, familiar walls rebuilding around his heart. Serena's presence was a constant reminder of the life he had discarded, the expectations he had defied, and the painful circumstances of Ilara's death. He saw the way Evelyn was affected, the subtle worry in her eyes, the strain around her mouth. He felt a resurgence of the guilt he had carried for so long, that his past was a curse, bringing only hardship to those he cared for. One afternoon, Serena appeared again, not in the cafe, but waiting for Julian outside as he carried out the trash. Evelyn watched from the window as Serena spoke animatedly, gesturing towards a sleek limousine, her posture radiating confidence and allure. She was offering Julian a path back to power, to wealth, to the world he had once commanded. Evelyn saw Julian's rigid posture, his occasional shake of the head, but also a flicker of internal conflict in his eyes, not for the wealth, but perhaps for the thought of shielding Evelyn from the growing societal scrutiny. That evening, as Julian played Ilara's song, the atmosphere in the cafe was thick with tension. Ilara's spirit, too, seemed affected. Her manifestation was more agitated, shimmering with a faint, almost protective glow. Her ethereal gaze kept flickering between Julian and Evelyn, and then towards the door, as if sensing the encroaching threat. Evelyn felt a surge of sadness for Ilara too, who was witnessing the world trying to pull Julian away once more. As the music swelled, Ilara's form seemed to focus on Evelyn. This time, Evelyn felt not just love, but a warning, a sense of urgency. Don't let him go. Don't give up on him. It was a desperate plea from the spirit, a clear message to fight for the man they both loved in their own unique ways. A few days later, the pressure intensified. A local newspaper, known for its sensationalism, ran a front-page story. Billionaire heir or delusional musician, the tragic tale of Julian Vance and his ghost lover. The article painted a damning picture, portraying Julian as unstable, clinging to a dead love, and Evelyn as an opportunistic cafe owner exploiting his vulnerability. The phone at the quiet hearth began to ring with hateful calls, and anonymous notes were slipped under the door. Evelyn found Julian staring at the newspaper, his face ashen, his hands clenched. He looked utterly defeated. "This is it, Evelyn," he said, his voice rough with despair. "I'm dragging you down. Your business, your reputation. Serena's right. I'm a mess. I bring only trouble." He avoided her gaze, his eyes fixed on the damning headlines. "No, Julian, you don't," Evelyn retorted, her voice firm, despite the tremor in her heart. "This is not you. This is her trying to break you, trying to break us." She reached out, placing a hand on his arm, but he flinched, pulling away. "You don't understand," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "This life, this curse, it's not fair to you, to anyone. I should just go back, end this, take the money, silence them and disappear again." The words were heavy with resignation, with a desperate longing to simply make the chaos stop. Evelyn stared at him, a cold dread washing over her. He was considering giving in, not for the wealth itself, but to protect her, to escape the relentless pressure. He was ready to sacrifice his newfound peace, his connection to Ilara, and the burgeoning love they shared, all to spare her from the fallout of his troubled past. The silent war over Julian's soul was reaching its painful crescendo, with society's judgment and Serena's ambition threatening to tear him away from the quiet haven Evelyn had offered. Chapter 8. The Parting Melody. The air in the quiet hearth grew heavy with unspoken tension after Julian's despairing declaration. The newspaper article had cast a long, ugly shadow, making Evelyn a pariah in her own community. The hateful calls continued, and the once bustling cafe now often sat empty, the lingering scent of coffee mingling with the bitter aroma of societal judgment. Evelyn tried to be strong, to reassure Julian, but the relentless pressure was beginning to fray her own nerves. Julian, meanwhile, had retreated further into himself. The open wounds of his past had been ripped raw by Serena's cruel manipulations and the public's harsh scrutiny. He felt responsible for Evelyn's suffering, for the damage to her livelihood. He started spending more time alone upstairs, his guitar silent, his eyes holding a haunted, distant look. Ilara's presence too seemed muted, a faint shimmer of sorrow rather than her usual serene glow. One dreary afternoon, a young, earnest reporter from a rival paper, one known for more ethical journalism, visited the cafe. She had heard the rumours, seen the damage, and was genuinely curious about the truth. Evelyn, after much hesitation, decided to speak with her, hoping to set the record straight, to paint Julian not as a madman, but as a man of profound love and tragic loss. She spoke of his talent, his kindness, his choice to live simply, and even, hesitantly, of Ilara's spectral visits, framing them as a testament to an enduring love. The article, when it was published a few days later, was sympathetic. It portrayed Julian as a modern-day romantic hero, choosing true love over wealth, and Evelyn as a compassionate woman caught in the crossfire. It challenged Serena's narrative, highlighting her manipulative tactics. While it didn't fully dispel the judgment from some, it offered a different perspective, a glimmer of hope. However, Serena, furious at the sympathetic portrayal, escalated her tactics. She arranged a public press conference, inviting all major media outlets. She would announce Julian Vance's imminent return to the corporate world, twisting the narrative to portray him as a victim of a delusional phase who was now coming to his senses and reclaiming his rightful place. She even hinted at a future reconciliation for them, creating a public spectacle designed to corner Julian and humiliate Evelyn. Julian saw the news report of Serena's impending announcement on a small television in the cafe. He looked at Evelyn, his face a canvas of conflicting emotions. "I have to go," he said, his voice flat, devoid of the melody Evelyn had come to love. "I have to deal with this. If I don't, she'll destroy everything you've built here, Evelyn. She won't stop." He made no mention of returning, no promise for a future. It was a choice, born of desperation and self-sacrifice, to sever ties, to absorb the blow alone. Evelyn felt a sharp, agonizing twist in her heart. She knew he was trying to protect her, but his words felt like a death knell. "Julian, no!" she cried, rushing towards him, tears welling in her eyes. "Don't let her win. Don't let her take you away. Don't abandon everything that truly matters." He finally met her gaze, his storm-coloured eyes filled with a heartbreaking blend of love and despair. "I have to," he whispered, his voice cracking. "I can't let you suffer for my past. This is the only way to protect you." He pulled away, creating a painful distance between them. "Please, Evelyn, understand." "Understand what, Julian?" she sobbed, her voice trembling. "That you'd rather sacrifice your heart, your music, your very soul, just to appease a manipulative woman and a world that doesn't understand you, that you'd rather be a captive in a gilded cage than free with a humble love." Her words were raw, fueled by hurt and the fear of losing him forever. He reached out, his hand hovering, almost touching her face, then withdrew. "Sometimes freedom comes at too high a cost for those around us," he said, his voice choked with emotion. He picked up his guitar, the instrument that had been his only solace, his only connection to Ilara, and walked towards the door. Evelyn watched him go, her heart shattering into 1,000 pieces with each deliberate step. He paused at the doorway, turning for one last look, his eyes lingering on her face, a silent apology, a promise of eternal remembrance, before he stepped out into the twilight and disappeared into the relentless demands of a world he had once rejected. The cafe felt hollow, cold, stripped of its warmth. The silence that followed his departure was deafening, a profound emptiness that echoed the broken pieces of Evelyn's heart. The music had stopped, and with it, the echo of Ilara, leaving only a parting melody of pain. Chapter 9. Requiem for a Love. The city hummed with anticipation. Serena Caldwell's press conference, a grand spectacle orchestrated to announce Julian Vance's return to the corporate empire, was moments away. The opulent ballroom of the Vance family's flagship hotel was packed with journalists, investors, and society's elite, their camera flashes illuminating Serena's triumphant, almost predatory smile. Julian stood backstage, dressed in a sharp, unfamiliar suit that felt like a cage around his soul. His face was a mask of cold resolve, his eyes empty of the life and music Evelyn had coaxed back into them. He was a prisoner in his own skin, sacrificing himself to protect Evelyn, to end the public scrutiny that had become unbearable. His heart, however, was a battlefield, torn between his desperate need to shield her and the agonizing pain of abandoning the fragile love they had built. As Serena stepped up to the podium, a figure slipped unnoticed into the back of the crowded room. It was Evelyn, her eyes red-rimmed but resolute, carrying Julian's battered guitar case, and she had known she couldn't let him go without a fight, without at least trying to remind him of who he truly was. Her heart pulsed with a fierce, unwavering love, a love stronger than any societal pressure, stronger than any ghost. Serena began her announcement, her voice ringing with confident authority, detailing Julian's return to reason and the restoration of the Vance legacy. She painted a picture of a man who had strayed, but was now back, ready to reclaim his power, ready to marry her, a convenient narrative to solidify her own position. Julian watched her, a bitter taste in his mouth, a quiet despair settling in his chest. Just as Serena was reaching her crescendo, Evelyn pushed through the crowd, her voice, though strained, carrying a clear, desperate plea. "Julian!" All heads turned. Serena's confident smile faltered. Julian, standing by the side of the stage, stiffened, his eyes meeting Evelyn's across the crowded room. He saw not judgment, but unwavering love, a fierce determination that mirrored his own, yet aimed at a different truth. "He's not a commodity, Miss Caldwell," Evelyn cried, her voice gaining strength. "He's a man of heart, of soul, of music. You cannot buy his love, or his freedom." She walked towards the stage, Julian's guitar case clutched tight. "He doesn't belong here. He belongs where his heart is, where his music can breathe." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Serena, her face contorted in a furious sneer, ordered security to remove Evelyn. But before they could reach her, Evelyn reached the stage, pulled the guitar from its case, and thrust it into Julian's hands. "Play for her, Julian," Evelyn urged, her eyes pleading, brimming with unshed tears. "Play for Elara. She wants you to live. She wants you to be happy." Julian looked at the guitar, then at Evelyn, then at the furious Serena, then at the sea of expectant, judgmental faces. He saw the cold ambition in Serena's eyes, the love in Evelyn's. He felt the familiar weight of the guitar, the silent promise it held. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and began to play. The first note, hesitant and raw, cut through the tense silence. Then another and another, slowly weaving the familiar, haunting melody of Elara's song. It wasn't just music. It was his soul laid bare, a desperate plea for understanding, a requiem for a love lost, and a nascent hymn for a love found. As the music filled the opulent ballroom, a subtle change occurred. A cool breeze swept through the room, carrying the faint, unmistakable scent of wildflowers. A soft, ethereal glow began to manifest near Julian, shimmering into the translucent form of Elara. She was there in the heart of the corporate world, drawn by his music, by his anguish, by Evelyn's fierce love. Elara's form was clearer than ever, her features distinct, her eyes filled with a profound sorrow, but also an enduring love. She looked at Julian, then at Evelyn, and a silent message passed between them. Her gaze held a poignant farewell, a silent blessing for Julian to finally be free, to choose life, to choose love. She reached out, her ethereal hand brushing Julian's cheek, then Evelyn's, a final gesture of acceptance and release. A single luminous tear seemed to fall from her eye, dissolving into mist, before Elara's form slowly, beautifully, faded, leaving behind only the lingering scent of wildflowers and a profound sense of peace. She had chosen to release him, to let him truly live. Julian opened his eyes, a single tear tracing a path down his cheek. He had felt her farewell, her final blessing. The truth, raw and beautiful, was now clear. He had been clinging to a ghost, not because she wished it, but because he hadn't dared to live again. He looked at Serena, her face contorted in disbelief and fury, then at Evelyn, her eyes filled with boundless love and fierce hope. He stopped playing, the final notes echoing in the stunned silence. He gently placed the guitar down, his gaze unwavering as he looked directly at Serena. "This," he said, his voice ringing with newfound clarity and strength, "is not my life. And you," he turned to Evelyn, reaching out to take her hand, "you are my truth, my future." The weight of his past, the burden of his grief had finally lifted, replaced by the profound, liberating realization that true love was about living, not just remembering. Chapter 10. The echo of a new song. The aftermath of the press conference was a whirlwind. The raw honesty of Julian's music, the undeniable, albeit ephemeral, presence of Ilara, and Evelyn's passionate defiance had stunned the public. The media, initially hungry for scandal, now found a story of profound, unconventional love. Serena Caldwell, her carefully constructed narrative, shattered, retreated in a storm of humiliated fury, her corporate machinations crumbling in the face of genuine emotion. Julian, his hand still clasped in Evelyn's, faced the cameras and the curious gazes with a newfound peace. He spoke not of wealth or power, but of love, loss, and the courage to live authentically. He explained Ilara's story, not as a haunting, but as a blessing, a spirit who had taught him to love beyond limits and ultimately to embrace a new life. He announced that he was formally renouncing his claim to the Vance fortune, donating a significant portion to charitable foundations in Ilara's name, dedicated to environmental conservation, a cause she passionately believed in. The rest, he decided, would fund aspiring musicians, allowing them the freedom to create. His music, he declared, would now be for the living, a testament to hope and renewal. Back at the quiet hearth, the cafe slowly began to fill again, not with curious gawkers, but with people genuinely moved by their story. The negative whispers had been replaced by a quiet respect, an admiration for a love that had defied societal norms and even the boundaries of life and death. Julian and Evelyn settled back into their life, but it was a life transformed. Julian no longer carried the heavy weight of perpetual grief. Ilara's presence was now a cherished memory, a guiding light, not a tether. He still played her songs sometimes, but it was no longer a lament. It was a beautiful, tender homage, a celebration of a love that had taught him to open his heart again. And when he played, Evelyn still felt a faint, sweet scent of wildflowers, a loving acknowledgement from the spirit who had graciously given her blessing. Their love story unfolded with a quiet grace, built on shared understanding, deep respect, and the unshakable belief in the extraordinary nature of their connection. Julian helped Evelyn in the cafe, not as a debt, but as a partner. He started composing new music, melodies filled with a vibrant hope, a joyous energy that had been absent for so long. Evelyn, in turn, inspired him, her kindness and unwavering faith helping him to find his voice again. One crisp autumn evening, as the last rays of sunlight painted the cafe in hues of gold and amber, Julian sat at the piano, a new addition to the quiet hearth. He played a melody Evelyn had never heard before, a vibrant, uplifting tune, full of warmth and promise. It was a song of new beginnings, of hard-won peace, of a love that was both tender and resilient. As the final notes faded, Julian turned to Evelyn, his eyes shining with a happiness she had never thought possible for him. "This one," he said, his voice soft, "is for you, Evelyn, for us." Evelyn walked towards him, her heart overflowing. She saw not the poor, broken musician from the rain-swept street, nor the burdened air, but Julian, her Julian, a man who had walked through the valley of the shadow of death and emerged with a new song in his heart. She reached out, her hand gently touching his face, feeling the warmth of his skin, the beat of his living heart. "It's beautiful, Julian," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "The most beautiful song I've ever heard." He smiled, a genuine, radiant smile that reached his eyes, chasing away the last vestiges of sorrow. "It's our song, Evelyn," he said, pulling her gently into his arms, the echo of a new beginning. As they stood there and embraced, the last golden light of the day enveloped them, casting their silhouettes against the window. The scent of fresh coffee mingled with the faint, sweet memory of wildflowers, a silent testament to a love that had truly transcended everything. Julian, the musician, had found not just a new song, but a new life, a new love, forged